Hi there. Welcome back to the Real Film Chronicles podcast. This is episode 12. As always, I'm Nathan.
And my name is Brian. And today we're going to be talking about a new film called Wrath of Man, starring Jason Statham and Guy Ritchie. Is that his name? Guy Ritchie?
Starring Guy Ritchie. Directed by Guy Ritchie.
Did I mess that up?
No, I mean, he's a star. He's the director of the movie.
Man, I am so confused what's going on right now. But we're just going to keep rolling with it here.
Yeah, who else is in this thing? There's a bunch of people that you know.
Holt McCallany.
Who you might know from...
I just saw him in Fight Club last week when I watched that.
Oh, yeah.
But most notably in Mindhunters.
I was going to say.
For the David Fincher Netflix series. Eddie Marsan, who I recognize from The World's End, Edgar Wright movie, Simon Pegg, Nick Frost, right?
Oh, yeah. He's a prominent British actor.
A bunch of other British productions as well.
Oh, yeah.
Surprisingly, seeing Josh Hartnett in here.
Josh Hartnett is back in Hollywood, guys. This is awesome.
Did he disappear? What happened to this guy?
Well, I think it was one of those cases where he consciously took a step back from the limelight.
Okay.
Where just like, yeah, he was concerned about his own kind of mental health and well-being, and he just took a step back from his career a bit. Like, he was actually up for the part of Bruce Wayne / Batman in Batman Begins.
Oh,
he
nice.
was this close to being Batman. You can't see. I'm holding my fingers up for those of you listening at home. This close.
It's a very tiny amount of space between your finger and your thumb.
Yeah, not as tiny as between my ears apparently, but yes.
We also have Scott Eastwood in here. I can't think of a movie I've seen him in, but I have seen him in a couple of movies. I just can't remember the titles.
You may have seen him. You may remember him from Fate of the Furious, where he was just like a generic dude in there to kind of fill out the team a bit. He was working with Mr. Nobody.
Okay, fair enough. I'm not recognizing many of the other actors in here. I'm not sure how far I want to go down the list, but if you have any notable ones, by all means, say it.
No, I think those were the main ones that I recognized.
Yeah, no, that's pretty fair. So I guess before we get started, I would kind of like to do what we've done previously. Instead of talking about spoilers for the film, we will give our 1 to 2 minute recommendation on the film, and then we will just dive immediately into it where we will go full spoilers. Do you think that's reasonable?
I think everything you say is reasonable, Brian.
Fantastic.
You're the one paying the bills, so.
I'm also curious. I guess so, man. We got to set up some kind of split expenses here. But we'll give our reviews, our actual star ratings afterwards. I have not peeked at Nathan's letterbox to see what he's given this film. I don't know what his first impressions are of this thing. I'm wondering if this is going to keep our agreement streak going, or if we will have any of our first major disagreements.
So initial impressions. So first of all, this is a Guy Ritchie film, and Guy Ritchie's been, I don't know if he's been one of my favorite directors, but he's been pretty influential in my journey in, my introduction to film and my love of film. Just for background, Snatch was literally the first DVD that I ever bought. Oh, really? Nice. Yeah, back in first or second year university when we first started collecting, but Snatch was originally the one. That movie made such a huge impact. Yeah. I went back and watched his first one, Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels. I love both those movies, by the way. Those are both 5 out of 5 movies for me. I haven't seen all this stuff, but I loved Rock'n'Rolla. Still waiting for the real Rock'n'Rolla to drop, as was teased at the end of the credits. Still waiting, Guy Ritchie. And then
you might be waiting a little while for that one. When did that come out? That was
I don't even want to look.
2008 Rock'n'Rolla.
And then, of course, he did the 2 Sherlock Holmes movies, starring Iron Man and Jude Law. The other one that what else recently? Oh, The Gentleman. The Gentleman.
Yeah.
I have to.
Which
I know this is a podcast for. It's an episode focusing on Wrath of Man, but I have to recommend The Gentleman. It was a highly overlooked movie by Guy Ritchie, dropped in 2019. It was dropped in
Yeah,
officially
it was 2019.
in 2019, but like it was a 2020 film. Amazing movie.
Pretty much.
And then so like I was pretty pumped to go into Wrath of Man, not least of which because like that title is just pure awesome. Like you hear Wrath of Man, like that's phenomenal. Like I don't know if Guy Ritchie gets final say over naming his movies, but like Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels, Rock and Rolla, Wrath of Man, like his titles alone get me amped up.
You're absolutely right. I never thought about that, but they are pretty they're pretty standout titles.
But I'll say for me in general, Wrath of Man did not feel like top tier Guy Ritchie. It was really it showed a lot of promise, but it was more kind of it was a solid movie, but it was kind of middle of the road for me.
Yeah. I hate to say it, but I absolutely agree with you. This was very much middle of the road to the point, right? Where it was just like I couldn't really settle on a rating. You know, it didn't feel as impactful as some of his other movies. It still has some of his flair and some of his director trademarks going on in there. And I think it is important that you sort of mentioned a lot of his movies there. He hasn't directed a ton of them, but the ones he has directed are pretty much full of style and they're pretty fun to watch. He has an interesting voice in cinema. I mean, Wrath of Man is no different. It is entertaining to watch. I had fun with it, but I couldn't help but feel like maybe there is something more to be done here.
Well, I think there was a little bit lost in translation because this was a film that Ritchie didn't write. And it was actually a remake of a French film.
Yes.
So it was kind of, I think Ritchie's at his best when he's directing his own work. And especially,
that makes sense.
And like, I know that it's more varied than that, but like when he's in that gangster world, that feels like it's home for him. And this was one of the movie's saving graces, I think, where it was still in that world of gangsters and organized crime. And that I think helped kind of direct and focus his energies. But yeah, there was something a little bit non-Guy Ritchie about the movie.
Yeah. And this was also kind of a reunion with one of his go-to actors, Jason Statham. I just have one quick question here. If you can, off the top of your head, name the other 3 movies that these two have done together.
I can. They did Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels.
Yep.
They did Snatch. And then they did another lesser known film called Revolver, which has been on my list for a long time. But for one reason or another, I haven't gotten around to picking it up. But yeah, I know it because I've been wanting to see it for so long.
Yeah, no, that's that's good. I would recommend this movie. Do you recommend this movie? Like based on the context of what this movie is, it's an entertaining 120 minutes. It's not a super long movie. It's pretty, I don't know if I want to call it straightforward because there's some interesting methods of storytelling here, but it is full of action. It is a heist movie. It's Jason Statham and Guy Ritchie. I mean, it's not awful.
Yeah, I guess if you're Rick Sanchez, you're probably going to hate this because it's about heists.
Little Rick and Morty humor for him.
Yeah, you son of a gun, I'm in. But yeah, so yeah, it is a bit more straightforward plot wise than some of Guy Ritchie's stuff. I was expecting, like some Guy Ritchie-ian kind of twists where there is some double crossing and there are a couple twists, but it lacks his usual kind of flair and that kind of dramatic sense. But it's still, it's a I don't know if it's like I say fun ride. It's an engaging ride, and it touches on some really interesting ideas that I wish it would have delved a little bit further into. But absolutely, like this is still a really entertaining, really engaging piece, and like all the actors in there are giving it 110%. I would definitely recommend this.
Yeah, and to put it in slightly different context, like we're kind of in a drought right now for new movies with everything being delayed and theaters being closed in our area and in the majority of the world at this point. For that context, this is an entertaining movie. It's kind of fun to watch a new movie. this is a movie that I would go see in theaters. I think if I saw a trailer for this, I would say, yeah, okay, let's head out to the movies to go see this. I'm glad that we got it on, I think it's out for digital rental right now, so we got to see it in that way, but this would be a movie-worthy release. I just wouldn't go in with super high expectations. It's not one of the better Guy Ritchie films. But with all that being said, I think this is a fair point to say there will be spoilers throughout the rest of this as we talk about it. But I would like to go back to the storytelling technique here. I think it was interesting you mentioned there wasn't a lot of Ritchie's usual twists and turns, and maybe that's attributed to that he didn't write this movie, right? But he did kind of spice it up with a lot of flashbacks and kind of telling the story in different segments, kind of in a non-chronological method here. To give you an idea, we basically start off the movie. We get about 10 or 15 minutes, I think, before we hit our first, it's probably more like 25, 30 minutes before we hit our first flashback of like, okay, these events now happened 5 months ago. And then we're going to go back to the present. We're going to get introduced to some characters. And then we're going to go back to 3 weeks ago. And then we're going to go back to the present, right? It kind of bounces back and forth there. And I didn't find it jarring, but did you enjoy that sort of time jumping in this movie?
Yeah, and that kind of nonlinear storytelling is pretty typical for Guy Ritchie. If you look at a lot of his work, it starts off with like, hey, here's what's going on, and then it'll jump back to, there'll be like some kind of crazy twist, and you're like, what is going on? And then the next scene is gonna jump back like 2 weeks earlier, and somebody was planning this crazy thing, and it came to, and you saw where it came to a head, and then it goes back to kind of explain it. So that's fairly in keeping with Guy Ritchie, but it's kind of neat because the film is broken up, I think, into 4 sections, each one with like a different title card, and each one corresponding to a specific time period in the story, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I did. I could appreciate the title cards on there. It's obviously reminded me of Snyder's Justice League with its 7 parts. It's like, this is a 4-part film, but you best watch the whole thing all at once, right?
Yeah, and I think that's also a callback to earlier filmmaking techniques. I mean, you see that also like in movies like Pulp Fiction, which again was an homage to kind of earlier films. But like the title cards really, it's really highly structured, and maybe I think that's coming, I think specifically from the original. I haven't seen the original French film that it's based on, but it feels like it's structured a little bit more formally. Maybe it's still nonlinear, but the structure feels a lot more formal maybe than Guy Ritchie.
It kind of classes up the movie a little bit, right?
Yeah.
So the movie, I neglected to read the overview of it. It's very short. It's not spoilery, but the overview is saying H is a cold and mysterious character working at a cash truck company responsible for moving hundreds of millions of dollars around Los Angeles each week. So that's basically how the movie gets going. Is Jason Statham is H. I can't remember his full name, but they all call him H. Everybody on the cash truck crew has a name, including Bullet, and I think Josh Hartnett is Boy Sweat.
Yeah, Boy Sweat Dave.
Boy Sweat Dave. Yeah. And essentially, the movie begins, and I think this is where you first see your nice Guy Ritchie directed action, where the first scene is a stationary one take. The camera is stationary in the back of this cash truck. It's angled out the front window, but kind of pointed at the side. So you can see the one the one cash truck employee get in on the passenger side. The driver is there. They're having a conversation. You can see out the front window of this vehicle. It's driving forward. It gets stopped by this other truck. You hear some gunshots. You see some people outside with guns, wearing masks. And basically these guys break in, and I kind of like the camera doesn't move at all during this time because the door on the side of this truck there in the cash truck, they basically cut a hole in it, and you get to see the whole hole. All the sparks come out of the hole, for lack of a better word. And then they enter the truck, they pull the guys out, and you don't see it, but you hear them talking to them. You see the guys unloading the cash from the truck. And then you hear some gunshots, and it's pretty clear these 2 cash truck employees were just killed on the street. And then it sort of fades into the credits of the movie, I think. And that's where Jason Statham, jumps in. He is a new employee for the cash truck company. And I don't know. Do you have anything else on that? How the movie plays out from there?
Yeah. Do you want to get into spoiler territory here?
Yes. I think we did give a spoiler heads up.
So essentially, this is basically, in short, it's a revenge film, right? Because as it turns out in that opening, that robbery, H, who turns out to be, I'm going to spoil everything right up front. I'm just going to spoil. I'm going to be
go for it.
Spoilerton here. H is actually, he's actually a crime boss who's gone undercover to get information to track down the crew who killed his son. His son was actually there witnessing the robbery. And he got killed as part of like collateral damage because the crew who was robbing saw that he saw them, and one of the guy's masks got torn off, and so they shot him to they killed a potential witness who could identify them. And so the rest of the movie, the reason that H is undercover is specifically to kind of track down the crews and see if they're speculating that there is an inside man or woman who was helping the crew, which turns out to be correct. Again, this is the whole movie. You can just turn the podcast off now, I guess, because we're going to tell you the whole movie. But so the whole thing is a father, tracking down and trying to get revenge for the death of his son, which watching as a parent, I mean, there's a certain, even though there's no real heroes in this movie, like the main character that Jason Statham plays is not a hero. He's a crime lord, and he's kind of like most crime lords are. He is either sociopathic or has sociopathic tendencies. He's not a good guy. So you don't sympathize with him, but you can empathize with him with losing his son, right? He was over from England visiting his son who was in school at university. And he was actually, the reason his son got killed inadvertently was because his crew in the States was actually planning a heist on that same truck that got robbed at the beginning by that other crew. Yeah. So he had actually gone to scout out to tell his crew was like which, the route that the truck takes. But then through, coincidence, bad luck, this other crew, who's a bunch of ex-military people, actually end up robbing it on the same day, and they happen to be there, and then his son gets caught in the crossfire. So you see at a later scene where his wife is kind of blaming him, not just for that day, but I guess just that whole life of crime. It kind of, sucks people in. So yeah, like you don't sympathize with these characters necessarily, with the main character, but you can certainly, I mean, Guy Ritchie does a good job at helping you empathize with the character, because anybody, even if you're not a parent, you can understand, if somebody takes that loved one away from you, that, there's a very real kind of human urge for not necessarily in some cases justice, but in some cases, revenge is a natural human urge, right? You want to, if somebody hurts you and takes someone you love, you want to hurt them back. It's not a healthy urge per se, but it's an understandable human kind of basic instinct.
Yeah, without a doubt. One of the reasons I want to talk about that intro scene and just the way it was shot is because we get to see that scene numerous times later on from different angles. So when we first encounter Jason Statham, it's a big mystery on who he is, right? And we have another scene. Basically, he's out on this first heist. Sorry, he's Guy Ritchie joins. No,
Guy Ritchie's there for sure.
Guy Ritchie, you told me he was the star of the film earlier. He's in the cash truck.
Yeah, Guy Ritchie plays the cash truck.
Yeah, that would be fantastic. So Jason Statham is out on his first assignment with the cash truck crew, and a bunch of criminals try to rob the truck, and he, without missing a beat, just gets out of the truck, shoots these criminals one by one shot in each of their heads, kills all of them.
He lays waste to them, and the funny thing is, because in order not to get noticed when he was doing his training, he was just getting the bare minimum, passing with the bare minimum 70% on his shooting, because he had to do target practice and stuff. And then, but then he comes out and he's one shot kill headshots for all these guys, for 4 or 5 guys.
It was terrifying. And it's okay, this guy, there's something going on, but he is a mystery at the beginning of the film. His coworkers are kind of terrified of him. The guy who owns the cash truck company loves it, is basically telling the other middle management to don't mess with this guy. Just let's bring him out on a bunch more of these trips here. And I think company policy is after a violent incident, you have to take a month off, seek therapy and whatnot, right? He's just like, no.
Yeah.
He just goes out the next day. It's like, I think, what did he say? You hired me to do a job. I did a job. Now tomorrow is another job.
Yeah. So it was really kind of interesting. It was really refreshing to have like the middle management guy wasn't a complete screw up. He wasn't evil. He was actually genuinely concerned and cared about his employees. Several times throughout the movie when people were getting robbed, which apparently happens all the time in this area. Were they Los Angeles? I don't know.
You know, I didn't pick up on what city it was in.
But they're getting robbed constantly. But he's constantly like, no, nobody's life is worth any amount of money. Just give them the money, back away. Like you went through this traumatic event. No, like take like a month desk job, we're going to pay for therapy. Like you got PTSD. Is like, no, like I care about your health more than the money. And it was kind of really refreshing to see like an actual competent kind of manager in a movie who wasn't a secondary villain.
Yeah, that was nice. That middle management guy was played by Eddie Marsan. Did a really fantastic job. There's some good stuff happening there. And I think at that point, I mean, we go back in time, we get a flashback. And honestly, I don't remember all the flashbacks and all this stuff. I can't go through it. But that first heist scene is played out differently later on. So we learn a bit of Jason Statham's history. We realize he is this crime lord, as you described earlier. I mean, he's really good at what he does, and he is absolutely ruthless, right? Like this guy knows only one emotion, and it's anger. Is it kind of strange? Like, how do you feel about Jason Statham as an actor here? Like, I don't see this guy play anything but himself. Well, I should say himself because he's not a sociopath. He plays the same character in all these movies. Well, he is super cool. He is aggressive.
That's where I think I differ with you a little bit, because I think this movie actually does show his range a little bit. Not in terms of like, yeah, he's made a name for himself, like in movies like The Mechanic, and in terms of like Crank, and all kinds of movies where he's just like, kicking bad guy butt left, right, and center, dozens of bad guys at a time. But you look at some of his earlier work, you look at like in Snatch, right? He wasn't like the total badass who was out there, beating up bad guys by the truckload. And this one too, I like, even though he's taken down other bad guys, sometimes quite brutally, but I like his range here where he's not a happy-go-lucky guy. He doesn't actually care about, like when at the end of the movie, the big set-piece battle is this kind of rogue crew who's made up of veterans, soldiers who were trying to came back from, I think, Iraq and Afghanistan, and they just weren't making enough money, and they decided to start escalating, like robbing different. They started with robbing houses, and then they upped it to armored cars. But at the end, when they do this big assault on the depot, Jason Statham's character doesn't care about anybody else. He's not trying to save people. All he wants to do is get the one guy specifically, the entire crew if he can, but the one guy specifically who killed his son. And that's it. Right. He's not trying to save anybody. He's not a good guy. And I like that he's playing it straight. He's playing it really, really stoic. And that, to me, it's a little bit different. You look at his character in The Meg, right? Which is another recent movie. And again, totally a really, really fun movie too. You look at his characters in like The Mechanic or in Crank, and you can start to see, I'm not going to say that he's got the same kind of quote unquote range as, somebody like Christian Bale or Daniel Day-Lewis.
Sure.
But I think this showcases like, he plays sometimes variations on the theme, but I think that maybe we don't give Jason Statham enough credit as an actor. So that was my in defense of Jason Statham's acting abilities. But I like that he
has that one lined up. I feel like when you're watching a Statham film, people are going to be criticizing this movie, and especially this role is on the surface kind of similar to many of his other action roles, right? It's just he does those action roles really well, and there is some nuance here. I think you're right.
Yeah, listen, like when you go like Jason Statham specifically went out and made a name for himself as an action star. So like there are specific expectations when you go and see a Jason Statham flick. Although he was in, what was it? There was he was in one with Melissa McCarthy, and he's supposed to be really, really funny in that. But I haven't seen it yet. I can't remember what the name is.
Just called Spy, I believe.
Spy, yeah. But apparently he's super funny as well. But yeah, or you look at his character in The Expendables, where he's like he's the sidekick character. He's the number 2 who's like joking around with Sylvester Stallone, right? So you can see like he's going out there, he's doing what he loves and he's having fun. But he does take on these different roles sometimes, right?
I'm just looking at his filmography on Letterboxd. I've seen 16 of dozens of movies, which I'm kind of surprised at the number of. But when you scroll through here, there's a lot of good action films here. And I want to point out, he was in Ghosts of Mars as well, a nice Carpenter film.
Oh,
if you're into some cheesy stuff. And a movie I watched probably last summer was Homefront, which I was kind of surprised at how much I was into that film. And he did a good job in there as well. As kind of a protective father who is basically after a bunch of people who piss him off, who threaten his family. Oh, I shouldn't have said that.
A bunch of people who anger him and threaten his family.
A bunch of people who anger him, yes.
He's quite perturbed. So, it always reminds me of that line from Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves. Something vexes thee.
Oh, my goodness. So, yeah, I mean, you mentioned the crew of ex-military who are basically after money, but also after a bit of the thrill of doing these jobs, right? And that entire assault on the cash trunk company was pretty fun to watch, but it was also like, I don't know, there's some crazy stuff happening there. And I just want to point this out because you mentioned how he didn't care about anybody else, right? He really, it was very clear he didn't care. And at this point, they know there's like a mole, there's a leak in the organization, and it turns out to be his driving buddy, Bullet. He knows this. Bullet, they basically capture Statham, they handcuff him, and they throw him into sort of the vault with a couple of the other employees. And at no point does he tell the other employees that Bullet is the leak. Like, he doesn't give these guys any information, right? And it actually comes into play later on because Josh Hartnett, Boy Sweat Dave, essentially lowers his guard in front of Bullet because he thinks, oh, this is part of our crew here. Like, this is my buddy. And he gets brutally murdered.
Oh yeah, like Holt, his name is Robert Paulson McCallany.
Yeah.
He does a really good job as the villainous heel Bullet really character in here, but he does that. He pulls that same trick several times on the rest of the crew too, because there's a couple other armored car employees heading out, and he goes over and is like, "Hey, give me that gun. I'll help you hold off the thieves." And he just like brutally murders them, shoots his buddies in the head, and then like Josh Hartnett. I hope Josh Hartnett's still alive. We never saw his character die.
He was wearing a vest, right?
Yeah, and he got shot once. Those things are good. That body armor. So like they must have gotten, like, the thieves definitely got their body armor from the John Wick 3 dudes.
The film was also kind of uncaring because we don't find out what happens to his character. Like, it wasn't a focus, but we do see him throughout the film, going through a bit of that therapy, right? Like, he wasn't fully on the job. He talked a big talk, but when it came down to seeing action, like, he kind of broke down. And I think I don't know if he was on desk duty, but he was perturbed throughout the film, right? And it took a lot of courage for him to get up and start shooting back in that finale, just for him to be betrayed by one of his coworkers. But I'm not sure if I'm just getting old, but Bullet's disposal of his other coworkers, that scene where he says, "Okay, give me the gun, I'll help you out," and he literally just shoots both of them in the head, and they're just gone. They just, you sort of see their legs fall to the ground, and that's it. You don't find out anything more about them. This guy just keeps going, right? It just, the movie felt cold to me, and I'm not sure if this is probably my own issue where, this type of action was a lot more fun when I was younger. now when I'm older and facing my own mortality and seeing how quickly it can be taken away.
No.
It's just, it was just brutal.
I think it was intentional on the part of Guy Ritchie to make the violence feel a lot more brutal and a lot more kind of, I don't know if grounded is necessarily the right word, but you feel the impact of that. It's almost like you're watching this violence through the eyes of Jason Statham's main character, who is completely kind of at this point, he's kind of emotionally detached from this kind of violence, where it's almost second nature to him. He doesn't care about anybody else. So it's almost like the filmmaking is kind of reflecting that main character's viewpoint. It was like, he doesn't care whether Josh Hartnett is still alive. He doesn't care whether those other people are still alive. He wants Scott Eastwood dead. And I can't say that I blame him.
And it was right. It was Scott Eastwood's character who was basically the catalyst for everything, right? Like he's the one who murdered Statham's.
Listen, on every team, you run a heist, you're gonna have the hothead, and Scott Eastwood. I've seen him in a couple of things. In Fast and the Furious, Fate of the Furious, the 8th movie, he was in there. Didn't make a huge impression. Didn't really. He seemed just kind of bland, kind of white bread. Every time I've seen him, he seemed like he was always playing like these clean cut characters that were just plain. And this one, he got to stretch his acting muscles a little bit more. He plays like the hothead. He's a bit scruffier. He's got his face is kind of scarred up, but I think it helped him disappear more into his role. I think this is my favorite Scott Eastwood performance so far. He really, I think he was really giving it his all. And I think it's really starting to show that he has a little bit more range than I might have given him credit for, and others too. I'm not the only one. There was a lot of people yelling things.
Yeah, for sure. I'm just looking at his filmography, and this is based on popularity. And I didn't even realize he was in any of these movies. So he was in Suicide Squad. He was in Fury, Gran Torino. You mentioned Fate of the Furious, Pacific Rim Uprising, Snowden, and he was in the Texas Chainsaw movie from 2013, the 3D one.
Yeah, see, I've seen a bunch of those, and I couldn't tell you what character he played at all. It was just, he was so unmemorable, right?
I think a few years ago, a friend and I watched Diablo, which is a 2015 film where he takes a more prominent role, and it's, it was a decent film. I don't seem to have a rating for it though, but it is what it is. But in this movie, he's pretty menacing. Like, this guy is kind of the unhinged part of that team, and it is maybe a little bit cliche, but you know what? I'm fine with that at this point. He just keeps escalating, and he just gets more greedy. It's like these guys want to do some heist. They want to get some money. They tell everyone, don't spend all this money. Don't be flashing around. And of course, he goes out, he buys this expensive motorcycle. He's got this super nice apartment right away. They start giving him grief. And the entire crew are concerned that if something goes wrong, it's going to be this guy's fault. And while it's not necessarily this guy's fault when everything goes wrong, because Statham is a factor in, ruining their day, right? Basically, this guy does screw over a couple of his heist buddies, killing them innocently, so to speak, because they are still all criminals at this point, to walk away with the entire cash and money that they tried to rob, which I think they walked away with like $170 million or something.
I think they were estimating 160 million, but it was closer to 180 million, I think middle manager man said.
Yeah, it was all taking place on Black Friday, which in the U.S. is a giant spending holiday where everyone's buying their stuff.
Social commentary.
Right? But that whole scene there where they're basically, I keep wanting to call it a precinct, even though it is basically just kind of like a cash truck warehouse.
Funny you mentioned that, because I was definitely getting, like, there was definitely some like Precinct 13 kind of vibes where like you're stuck in that you're under assault by an external force, and then essentially, even without knowing it, like criminals and kind of good guys, in this case security guards, are kind of working together to fight back against these rioters here, or these, in this case, the thieves. So there was, like that kind of, I don't know if there's like an actual kind of narrative term or a TV trope about that, but like essentially like it's the assault on Precinct 13 paradigm.
Yeah. And it was interesting to hear like the cops couldn't help because this place is kind of locked down and they can't let anyone in because only the internal controls can kind of open the gate, so to speak, right? But I do enjoy, you don't get to see them planning a ton of their heist, not every detail, just like any heist film, you see these guys planning it. But there's some details that are not, especially the last part where I think they are escaping through some tunnels because obviously there's a huge police presence outside the cash truck warehouse, and they just use one of these armored vehicles to blast their way through a couple of cars. There's helicopters overhead. It's like, how could you possibly escape from this? And it's kind of, it's that movie Clever where they go into an old structure that's kind of abandoned and there's all these unmarked tunnels. They have a car lined up. They switch vehicles. Scott Eastwood kills some of his buddies and drives away scot-free. And at the very end, he's back at his apartment. Job well done, pat himself on the back, and sitting in the shadows, of course, is Jason Statham, ready to take his revenge. And it's like, how do you want to see this guy? How did you want to see that end scene play out?
Yeah, I think it would have been more cathartic for the audience watching it if like if it was drawn out a little bit more where that Scott Eastwood's character kind of was made to realize like, oh, that kid I killed, this is his father, right? And like this is why I'm getting revenge. But I think it works for the character where we don't get that catharsis because there's no catharsis really to be had. Like these are bad people doing bad things to each other, and we're not supposed to feel like justice was served really. But he just really quickly just like, yeah, he gives him the coroner's report from his son. I think what was the chapter name? It was like, was it heart, spleen, liver, lungs? Yeah, heart, spleen, liver, lungs. But it's like essentially, he goes through and is like, these are all the places where he got shot, leading to his death. And then Jason Statham proceeds to surgically shoot Scott Eastwood's character in each of those locations in his body.
Yeah, he shoots him in the spleen, and then he shoots him in the liver, then the lungs, and finally the last shot in the heart, right?
And yeah, just to drive home the point is like he walks away and he does not take a second look at that money. He doesn't care about the money. Yeah. There's 170, 180 million dollars just lying around in bags, which again is like way too heavy for any one man to haul around. I mean, that'd be literally thousands of pounds. But anyway,
yeah, I guess
it's movie money, so you can fit 180 million dollars into like 5 duffel bags. It's fine. But like he leaves without touching any of the money, and just to drive that point home, it's like this guy was on a tear, right? He was, I think one of the chapters was literally called Scorched Earth, right? When he was trying to track down this crew who killed his son, and he was just going to other criminal crews and just like torturing them and killing them, trying to get information on the individual who killed his son. And yeah, he was just completely one-minded, completely sociopathic. And I think that scene, even though I wish it was drawn out a bit more, it works for the character because he's there for business, right? He's not going to give this guy a chance to get the upper hand on him. He's like, no, I came to kill you. I'm going to kill you. I'm going to leave.
Because he does know that these guys are like highly trained military dudes.
Oh, like by the end of the movie,
pose a threat to
like
him.
They get the drop on him. They tie him up, like you said. And then even when he escapes, he's fighting them off. He gets stabbed in the leg and he gets shot several times. So like he's limping out of that apartment to go to his buddy downstairs waiting for him. But yeah, he takes damage from these guys. These guys are portrayed as like a serious threat. Like they're ex-military veterans from they were in the theater of war in the Middle East. Like these guys are not playing around.
I did enjoy that, Statham is this crime boss of this area, and basically all these guys are like, he sends his whole crew out trying to find these guys doing their stuff. And I think that's that Scorched Earth chapter you were talking about where he's just going everywhere, just taking names, killing people, and some of his underlings are just like, you really like, I respect what you're doing here. Like, you don't want to question the boss in this policy, but it's like, we are raising way too many questions. Like, we can't just go around killing everybody for this. And at that point, Statham says, okay, well, I'm going to go back home for a bit, which is Britain. And he gets instead a fake ID and identity, the whole 9 yards, to go work for this cash truck company, right? It's one of the only links that I think he has to the killing.
Oh yeah,
But,
and then because at one point in the film, it's not played for laughs, but there's kind of a dark humor there. At one point, the cash truck is under assault again, and then Jason Statham steps out, and because they shoot like there's like a smoke bomb in the truck,
like tear gas.
Yeah,
or something, yeah.
Comes out. He's got like a cloth over his face to protect him from the tear gas. Pulls the cloth down from his face. The guys who are robbing them were wearing masks, but you can see is like their eyes get big, and it cuts to later on. Is like they're questioning him again in the second robbery, and it's like, so you're saying they literally just turned and walked away, and they're all like, this is insane, right? And again, the CEO is just like, I don't care, he's saving my money. He doesn't care.
And Statham, again, he doesn't not tell the truth. Like, he just said, that's exactly what happened. I got out of the truck and they just ran away. And it's like, technically they did.
Yeah, but the point is that the people who were robbing him were actually his own crew.
Yeah.
They didn't know he was undercover. And so the reason that they ran away was because it's like their boss came out of the back of the truck and they're just like, yeah, we're out of here. I don't know why this is the way it is, but like the boss comes out of the back of the truck. Yeah, we're going to go back home now.
There was some little subplot with the only woman in the film with any lines, I think. She's part of the cash truck crew, where I think he's questioning her because they think maybe she's the leak. She's the mole in the cash truck company.
So he's doing investigations on everybody. He has his associate, and she's running background checks on people. But yeah, at one point he seduces this female bank truck employee. And then he finds a bunch of cash at her apartment. He specifically seduced her so he could get into his apartment and look around. Finds this bundle of cash, and he's just like, and he pulls out a gun, and he's like, you're gonna tell me why you have this money here, and I want you to think very carefully before you answer. And then he starts like going over the details of her parents and where they live, and she tells him eventually that she, this is money, it fell off the truck from one of the deliveries, and she picked it up. It's a retirement fund. It's 125 or 150K or something. So it's small potatoes to big, big heisters like us, like that's nothing.
Yeah. Yeah. And it just kind of reinforces that like every single character in this film was kind of a bit of bad news, right?
Shades of gray, but also, like Jason Statham's character H is like, doesn't care about the interpersonal relationships. He'll use any means necessary. Yeah. So there's that sociopathic thread running through all of his actions where you see him like so emotionless all the time. It's like there's something. Jason Statham does a really good job of conveying that there's something not quite right behind this guy's eyes, right? It's like he's going through all this stuff and seeing this insane violence, and people are like, other people around him are like, like they're trying to deal with this and cope with it, and he's just like, he's sitting there emotionless. It's like, yeah, no, you hired me to do a job. I did my job. Can I go now? And people are like, I think at one point somebody's like, yeah, this guy's like a psychopath.
Yeah, they definitely notice that, he's a psychopath. It's just like, oh, okay, well, we'll just keep going, I guess. It was really surreal.
Yeah, so there's a lot to like about this. Like Jason Statham in an action film, if you like revenge plots, which are, like, it's a tried and true kind of plot structure, right? That people can identify with and get emotionally invested in.
So before we give our ratings for this movie, I got to ask a couple of things. One of which is more of a statement, but during watching this movie, I'm trying to take some more notes while I watch movies that I think we're going to be talking about. And I had a feeling as soon as Wrath of Man came on, okay, we're going to talk about this film on episode. I wrote down this quote, but I forget the context. Maybe you'll remember it. I think it's Statham saying, "Kill or be killed seems to focus the mind." Right? I'm not sure where that came from, but that line stood out for me. It's just like, that's that guy right there. That's kind of like the Jason Bourne school of thought, where once the stress starts hitting, that's when the mind gets focused, and he just becomes an unstoppable killing machine, right?
Yeah,
a real precision tool.
He says it after the first or second robbery on the armored truck that he's in. But yeah, where they're questioning him is like, why don't you seem to be? You don't seem too shook up about any of this. And it's like, or they asked him like, how did you like you had only a 70% accuracy rating when you barely passed your firearms training. It's like, how did you pull off 5 clean headshots in a row? And it's like, yeah, kill or be killed tends to focus the mind.
Yeah.
And it just like walks away calmly and was like, yeah, like you did a good job, but like this guy's there's something kind of unsettling about him, right? And rightfully so. This guy is, in any other context, he's the bad guy, right? He's only the protagonist of this film because we're following him from his point of view because he's trying to avenge the death of his son. But he's a bad dude, right?
Yeah, he's terrifying, really. So what do you rate this movie out of 5 stars? I want to see if we're far off from each other here. We seem to have pretty same opinion of this film.
Right. So all the stuff that we talked about so far, I think where it falls down is, I think some of the dialogue felt a little bit off. For some of it felt, I don't know if it was just the nature of the dialogue or the actors, or I don't know what it was, but some of the dialogue felt a little bit stiff. Some of the backstory could have been fleshed out a bit more, but yeah, overall, I thought it was like a solid run of the mill, kind of middle of the road action / revenge flick. And I would give this a rating of 3 out of 5 stars.
Wow. I am also at 3 out of 5 stars. Exactly. Cause I really did like, if this was absolutely middle of the road, I would say 2.5 easy. But I think it is a few of Guy Ritchie's flares in his directing that kind of set it above it. And Statham is compelling to watch as well, right?
Listen,
there is some fun stuff happening.
Yeah, I'm never gonna turn on a Jason Statham flick. If you're just gonna tell me like Jason Statham is just gonna sit there and beat up bad guys for 2 hours, it's like sold. I'll put my money down for a ticket. Done.
Yeah, exactly. The other question at this point is, do you purchase this movie when it comes out on Blu-ray? Do you add this to your physical media collection?
It's not top of the list. As a Guy Ritchie fan, I would put down some money for a standard edition if it's coming out. If the Criterion collection comes out and releases a special edition of Wrath of Man, I'm probably not going to pay $35 for this. But if it's like $10, it's like, listen, I'll pick this up.
It's one of those ones I'm kind of curious because it is a Guy Ritchie film. Do you have a Guy Ritchie like sub collection sitting on your shelf?
See, I thought I was a Guy Ritchie fan, but then I was like looking up his filmography and it's like, I really, there's a whole kind of section of his career where I don't have a lot of his movies and I haven't seen them. So it was like, I really, the stuff, Guy Ritchie's stuff that I love, I really, really love. And then a bunch of other stuff really didn't pique my interest. Like recently, what did he do? Did he do the King Arthur, I think?
He did King Arthur, yeah.
Did he do, was it Robin Hood his as well? Did he do Robin Hood recently? Or was that
Robin Hood? No, I'm not seeing that here.
Okay.
Honestly, so I'll just go. The site seems to be kind of busted here. I'm trying to sort by.
Do it from memory. I
can't. So basically, his filmography, starting at the beginning, with a really Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels, followed up by Snatch. There's a couple movies in here, one called Star, another one called Swept Away, Event Revolver in 2005, Rock and Rolla in 2008, and then we get hit with the 1-2 Sherlock Holmes and its sequel, which, were decent movies, but
I have them on my shelf.
The Man from U.N.C.L.E.
Oh, see, that's the thing I've heard. The Man from U.N.C.L.E. is supposed to be really, really good.
I really enjoyed that. I remember going to the theater to see that with a couple friends, and I think we all really enjoyed it. I've revisited it a couple of times. It's decent. And then King Arthur, The Legend of the Sword in 2017, which again was not a film that I really went out of my way to see. I didn't really realize it was a Guy Ritchie film, and once I started watching it, it's like, oh, there's some visual flourishes here that's really pulled me in. I kind of enjoyed like the physicality of some of the hits and stuff. They're like, I don't know if they're doing some camera shakes, but there seemed to be some weight behind some of the action, if that makes sense.
Was that the one? Was that? Was that Charlie Hunnam starring in that?
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah. And then he did the Aladdin live action movie for Disney.
Oh, that's right. That Aladdin movie I'm never going to watch. That is a shame.
And it looks like he's set to do an Aladdin 2, which is surprising.
Another Disney remake I'm never going to watch. Perfect.
Yeah. So, and of course, The Gentleman and Wrath of Man being the most recent one. I mean, you brought up Wrath of Man. I didn't have any idea this movie was coming out. I don't know. Did you just see a trailer of this online, or are you following Guy Ritchie enough that some of his, like, this release was on your radar?
Well, yeah, he just happened to be over last weekend, and we were just talking about it, and he brought this up. So so I told him, yes, okay, Guy, I'll take a look at the movie and I'll let you know what I think.
Yeah, do him a little favor on the side.
Yeah, right? as will happen, just like.
But noted that you didn't bring him on the podcast or anything. I can't help but feel a little slighted by this.
Well, I mean, there was that incident in Las Vegas, Brian. He didn't want to. I know you're still kind of sensitive about that.
I'm just going to stop you right there. And yeah, we don't. I apologize for giving you any grief over that. Let's not get into Las Vegas. Oh my goodness.
You got any other recommendations or final thoughts here? Like, are you gonna pick this bad boy up?
Definitely not. Not. I mean,
definitely not.
This is really out of my wheelhouse, and I'm honestly like surprised. Like, I've just been clicking around on some of Statham's movies here while we're recording, and I am shocked at how many I've seen. And I've seen a lot of good movies where he's been in, and I'm surprised that I don't find them more memorable. Maybe it's just I don't really value purchasing these kind of action movies for my home media collection, but I should be going back to rewatch some of these films. And I'm looking at some of his most popular ones. Snatch, of course. It's been 20 years since I've seen that, and all the Fast and Furious movies. I remember going out to see Meg. It was a fun movie. I haven't seen some of these other ones like Spy. The Expendables is tons of fun, right? But I just don't find myself adding these movies to my collection. They're not a high priority for me. But this movie was good. I enjoyed it. Will I ever revisit it? Maybe in a few years. I don't know. It could be one of those things where we're going through Guy Ritchie's filmography and he hasn't done a lot of films. I mean, we're talking just around a dozen. This one would be an easy rewatch, I think.
It's an easy project for you, Brian. Collect all Guy
honestly,
Ritchie
stuff. That alone is kind of appealing because it's just, you just have a little Guy Ritchie section on your shelf, just like you do for Fincher and whatnot.
Well, it's funny because, like, in our circles, like, we know Guy Ritchie. We know Guy Ritchie pretty well. Like, for us, he's a well-known filmmaker. So I always, in my mind, I built him up as more kind of prolific, as having, like, not more prolific, but like having a larger library of films that he's directed. But I was looking up online as well. I was ignoring you while you were talking and looking it up online as well. And yeah, he doesn't have a whole lot of films out there, right?
Yeah,
maybe a dozen. It's
surprising. Honestly, I don't know. We'll have to check out some of these lesser known ones. The Hard Case, for instance, which it's a 20-minute short film in 1995, but probably interesting.
Easy peasy. Well, I think Swept Away was his when he was married to Madonna, or that was.
Oh yes,
Madonna
that's right.
film, right?
Yeah, 89 minutes. That's nothing right there. You should definitely check that out. Let me know how it is. Bruce Greenwood is in that.
I'll keep you updated.
Jeanne Tripplehorn, probably Elizabeth Banks. There's a whole bunch of people in this movie. Imagine that. Swept Away. I'll be sure to check that one out.
Sweet. So, yeah, what are your final thoughts? What are the lessons learned from watching Wrath of Man? What has it taught us?
The major
about life,
lesson that I got out of this is that I am getting older and I am shocked when I see sudden violence and people dying on screen in my action movies now. But honestly, I don't think I walked away with a whole lot from this film. If you go in with the proper expectations, you can get a lot of enjoyment from this movie, and I think it's doing pretty well from audiences. And it's like, I think I saw it was in the mid-60s on the Rotten Tomato meter, which is what it is, but that's probably exactly where it needs to be. I don't know. I got nothing else aside from that. Like, this was just a decent film.
Yeah, like, check out Wrath of Man if you go into it with the right expectations. You're going to have a good time. Maybe good time isn't the right word for it, but you're going to, enjoy the cinematic experience. But yeah, this is not a game changer. It's not going to change your life. You're not going to come away with some big epiphany. I feel like I've been saying this a lot lately, but yeah, it is what it is.
I think that's some valid. That might be some valid context, because the more I read online of movies and the takes people have, I think a lot of people put heavy expectations on films, and this one might not be any different. Like, Guy Ritchie has done some amazing stuff in the past, and you might expect, a mind-blowing Guy Ritchie film. Maybe you're like us, you saw Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels when you were young, and it did blow your mind. And now Wrath of Man, it's not going to be on that same level, but that's fine. I mean, not every movie has to be a game changer, right? Some movies just serve this purpose, and I think this is a perfect example. Yeah, that 3 out of 5 stars is still a solid rating for a film.
Listen, some days you're making Jaws, and some days you're making Ready Player One, right?
Yeah,
you're not
exactly.
You're not making a masterpiece every time, right?
Not every single one can be winners, right?
Yeah, and it's not maybe Wrath of Man isn't a podium finish, but it's still put in a good effort.
And that's a wrap on another episode of the Real Film Chronicles. Thank you so much for listening and hanging out with us today. We're having a great time putting these together and love sharing these episodes with you. We can be found on a few platforms, including Facebook, Twitter, and Letterboxd, all of which are linked in the show notes. You can also reach us by email, and of course, you can find our website at realfilmchronicles.com. Until next time, take care of yourselves and others, and keep that film journey going.